We'll, as soon as everybody gets back, get going.
Jerry Lee.
Hi, I'm Jeff.
Jeff, good to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Congratulations, both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
The other Jeff.
I know, two Jeffs.
Okay, yeah,
I know,
Jeff
both
two,
of
yeah.
you. Congratulations, both of you.
Appreciate it.
Is that Jeff 1 and Jeff 2 or Jeff 1?
Either way.
Either way,
Yeah,
we'll know.
yeah.
But this one here, you probably seen, he's got his picture up on the billboard.
Oh, yeah.
So that, he classified as Jeff.
Right next to the statue.
Well, I thought you were going to say,
Yeah.
if he's got the, I thought you were going to say the post office, but I wasn't
No,
sure.
no, not yet, not yet, just,
The police station.
Give it time.
Give it time.
I'm ready, man.
Okay, you're ready? Okay, for the quorum being present, we'll call this meeting to order. I'll turn it over to Mr. Jerry Lee from MSBA. Thank you for coming.
Matt, thank you. Appreciate being here. And I'll just hand out while we're talking about things.
you're not gonna give us a test when we're down, are you?
You weren't supposed to say that. You weren't supposed to spill the beans.
You got another one?
Yep. Oh, I forgot to give Marty one. Go Mac.
I got
Several
one.
of them.
You got it?
Yep, that's it.
Who doesn't have? Two left, that's why he's perfect. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about board superintendent relationship and just board service in general. Just a little bit about me, just so you kind of know. Kind of a local, I've got family in Hartville and Mountain Grove, so I kind of know this area, and grew up in Rogersville, so went to school in Rogersville. And some of you may know, I mean, I spent the last 15 years on the school board in Springfield, which has been fun at times and not as fun at times, but that's the way it goes. And but it has been an enjoyable time. I've been at MSBA for the last 5 years, doing training and membership and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my background, and just enjoy getting out working with boards. I go to a lot of board meetings and people just kind of go, are you nuts? You know, what's wrong with you? I love going to board meetings. You find out so much about the district and the community and just what's going on. It's just really enjoyable. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about just the role of the board, and we'll get into some more detail, but congratulations to both Jeff and Marty. Congrats to you for your new endeavor here. 2 weeks in, well, 3 weeks in, I guess, officially.
Something like that.
Are you bobbing yet?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Yeah,
As long as you
bobbing.
keep coming up for air, you're okay.
Yeah, just
That's
can't
the key,
sink.
is coming up for air. So, we're gonna talk about that positive relationship between the board. I mean, you got a new team. You know, the two board members, new superintendent, it's a whole new team. So now's the opportunity to kind of start fresh with that. So, I'm gonna start with just one thing, just kind of icebreaker. If I went around the table, what's one of the most memorable things about your school experience so far? As a board member, maybe as a parent, I don't know, in Willow Springs. And I'm guessing all of you are Willow Springs Navy, is that right? Pretty much?
Yeah.
You're not? Okay.
Might as well.
When you've been
What'd I say,
here 50
Navy?
years, I think
Well, I count that as, yes, that's Navy. That's Navy. So what's been, just as a board member, what's been some of your most memorable experiences?
I'll go.
Yeah.
You're always.
I'll break the ice. You know, we had to handle a lot of challenging things through COVID with a lot of different opinions and stuff and different directions people wanted to go. And after it was kind of all done, we were a little ways down the road there. I had a student who I have no idea who he was come up to me and thanked me and the board for the decisions that we made and kind of how we handled some stuff. And you get some thanks from parents and teachers and different stuff right there. But for a student to be that engaged and recognize, you know, what we were doing up here, it was pretty memorable.
That would be really good. Yeah, that would be good.
I like learning, being an employee, or the school staff, and getting to know them, and really, you know, you sit outside and you think you know a lot, but just learning really what it's about. I've enjoyed that.
It's different on the inside of the door, isn't it?
Very different. So I've enjoyed that.
Yep.
Mine was meeting Coach Colley the first day I showed up here to do my student teaching years ago.
Okay.
Now that I think about it, that's gotta be memorable.
That's your highlight of all the years.
It's all
You know,
downhill
there's
after
certain
that.
things that you kind of want to forget, but they just get stuck there.
Brush those under the rug a little bit and do that. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I can just say that being on the school board has been incredibly rewarding, and I hope you all have found that the same way. And 2 months, 3 months in, I hope you find that over the next 3 years, 6 years, however long you stay. Hope you find that as rewarding in what you do, because you do make a difference. You do make a difference in kids. And don't let anybody ever tell you different, because you do. Okay, tonight we're gonna talk about several things, but kind of give you an idea of some of the things we're gonna address. One is just how do you strengthen that relationship between the superintendent and you guys, Marty and you as a board? How do we talk about that? How do we talk about the roles of each? And everybody understands that. We're gonna talk about communication, which is a huge opportunity and a huge challenge sometimes. So we're gonna talk about that, and then kind of hit community engagement a little bit, for a couple of reasons. One is the new community engagement law that just got passed, Senate Bill 681, that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then my understanding, you guys are kind of contemplating something down the road. Don't know if that happens or not, but how do you get the community engaged in what you're wanting to do, whether that happens or not? Just in general, how do you get your community engaged and do that? And I don't know if that's an issue now, but we're gonna talk a little bit about the best ways to do that. So, everybody cool with that? Good to go? Okay. Like I said, you got a whole new team now. So how do you want to be perceived in the community as a governance team? I mean, how would you like to be perceived? So if I ask you the question, Willow Springs governance team, that's your team of 8, is what? I mean, what would you say, how would you answer that question? How do you want to be perceived in the community as a board?
I'd say receptive to public input.
Okay?
I would say approachable.
Good.
Transparent?
Transparent. What else? I know there's more.
Effective. Maybe forward-looking.
Vision.
Yeah.
What was that last one?
Vision.
Yeah,
Vision?
that goes along.
Yeah, to build off of that.
You did a good list together.
I think we should be reflective of the community's values and beliefs as a whole.
Responsible.
That's a good list. I know we spent a lot of time putting more, but that is a really good list. And we're gonna talk about several of those tonight that you came up with. So let's move on. I have to point it to you. Point to Marty, not me. Excuse me, but I want to praise that.
I think we could turn.
but I don't
Yeah,
use it.
the,
I wanna take a picture of it.
It's frozen up
Oh,
for
yeah.
this room. It's working out there, so.
Okay.
We'll
Just
try to
need
get
a
it.
fan.
Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody came up to you tomorrow and said, you're a board, I'm thinking about running for the board. Tell me what your role is and your responsibility as a board member. If you had to tell them what it is, they said, what do you do? What exactly do you do as a board? What do you tell them? What were you told when you decided to run for the board?
What were we told? Don't do
Yeah,
it.
Run like a rabbit.
Run, but the other direction.
Gotcha. Okay, what do you tell somebody? What's your role and what's your responsibility as a board?
Just think, I don't know whether made one or not, you do a lot of listening, a lot of researching, when people have questions.
Mhm.
I'd probably ask them, I would ask them, what is their reason for running?
Okay.
Why do they, you know, in other words, do they have an agenda, or do they wanna run? For me, the right reason is to, you know, is for the kids' education and for the whole district, not to have an agenda.
Okay.
I think kind of along with what we had just put on the list before is, I mean, we're kind of a sounding board for the community.
Okay.
Policy making. Financial management.
I'd say the way, I guess you'd say we're the direct supervisor of the CEO, superintendent. He's basically our one employee.
Make sure this is right. Right. Hire and manage a superintendent. Manage is probably not the right word, but
Yeah.
yeah, what else? Anything else you can think of? Ask you the same question, what about superintendent? What are his responsibilities, or her responsibilities?
I think Collie said it there, he's the CEO of the school, I mean, he runs the school district.
He's the face of the brand too, you know, that people in the community, everybody looks that way.
Which is an interesting concept from the standpoint of, you know, as the governance team, he kind of reports, or she reports to you, but most of the time they're the face. That's who people see, they don't see us as board members.
Then he's the head financial officer, or
The CFO.
CFO.
Okay? What else? What else does Marty do?
Well, he's directly or indirectly responsible for hiring all employees.
So. I said manage and direct staff, is that what you're talking about? Okay. Because your responsibility is to hire employees,
Yeah. And then,
ultimately, not, I mean, you have to approve every employee that's hired.
And he does that through the administrative team.
Correct.
That he's direct contact with.
So I'm gonna write that one down. Delegates to staff.
So when you get down to it, I don't know if you said face or brand, is that, I mean, he's the face of the district?
Uh-huh.
Oh, is that what you?
Yeah. I think that's whoever said that, I think that's what you meant. Yeah. Okay. Another good list. So we're gonna talk a little bit about those roles and how they interact and how they work with each other. So, for your policy, which your policy explains these roles and responsibilities of the board itself, and there are several. And I may not go through every one of these, they're in your handout. But policies, employ the superintendents, you got a bunch of these already. Evaluation, budget, staffing, you are the liaison between the community and the district. I mean, you are the elected officials, and so you are the liaison. Evaluate goals, and then the other one some people don't think about is have judicial responsibilities as a board. I don't know how often you've had hearings or employee hearings, or where you've had to be a jury, so to speak, but that's part of the responsibility of being a board member. Sometimes those come to you. Hopefully not very often, but sometimes they do. And you have to perform those duties. Superintendents, and you hit just about every one of those, communicate the board's directives to the staff. That's the liaison between you and the staff as the superintendent, making sure what you address, what you adopt, gets directed down to the staff. He or she's gonna put procedures together to make sure that follows your policies. And it's back, we'll talk about it some more, but that's back to you all determining what needs to be done. His responsibility is how to get it done. How do we get that done? Big one's accountability. I mean, like I said, that's your only employee you got. Holding them accountable, holding him accountable is critical. And then delegating the responsibility. So, clear roles, but sometimes they get fuzzy, sometimes. One thing I want to talk about here is, we got a group of 7 individuals as board members, and nothing can be done as an individual board member. Has to be 7. I mean, you do it by motions, you do it by votes. That's how you do. You have no individual authority whatsoever as a board member, by law. So, I, as a board member, may want Marty to go do something. Technically, just until the board votes on it. Until the board makes a decision. That's the only way he can manage and operate and not have 7 bosses. He just has 1 boss. Happens to be 7 people, but it acts as a whole. So it's really important. Community doesn't totally understand that, I'll just tell you. Do they? Right, when you get elected. I mean, I call it the cheers syndrome, where everybody knows your name now, and they want you to fix their problems. Because you can't. You can't, but they think you can. That's the first call they get. And we're gonna talk about that a lot here in a minute as far as that process. But nothing can happen except as a body of a whole. As I mentioned before, all the authority rests with the board itself. No legal authority. Support the decisions made by the majority of the vote. That's really important. Once a vote's made, it's done. Maybe 7-0, maybe 4-3. In the end, it's still a vote. And that's the direction to go, until another vote's taken. And so that's one of the things, is supporting wherever the board decisions are to do that. And that's by law, your policy talks about that, and law talks about that, as far as that individual authority. And I think one key thing to remember about, from a legal standpoint, is as long as you act as a whole, you're not liable individually. You start going off, doing something outside of that, you run the risk of liability. Like violating sunshine law or confidentiality or crazy stuff like that. That's just something that you want to act as a whole. That protects you, protects the district, protects everybody. That the board has made those decisions and acted like that. We talk about a lot of this, I as an individual board member versus we. You know, I want you to go do this as opposed to should we as a board have the district or the superintendent do something, you know. Give me a list of all the bus drivers who've had violations. Well, that's probably not the best approach, is you'd like a safety report of the transportation department. That's the governing approach as opposed to a board member, individual board member taking that approach. This is always the most fun thing is developing the calendar. I know that's the most exciting thing superintendents and staff do every year. Our people hated it with a passion. It was just like, oh, don't put me on that committee. I don't want to be on that committee. But we should change the start date. Well, that's not exactly the approach. You want to do it from a strategic standpoint of developing that calendar based on what's the data out there to show that. And so, you know, this is back to this we thing. We're all in this together. Okay, example here, just ABC School District decided to add a new position for Director of Student Services and Instruction. Board member Valerie knew that student achievement performance had been stagnant for a few years and was excited that this would become a focus. And looking at the agenda for the week, this week's board meeting, she noticed the superintendent would be making a recommendation for hiring one of the candidates. Anxious to ensure that they select the best one, she contacted the superintendent's secretary and asked for copies of the finalist application. She said she'd stop by the next day to pick them up. Is she following policy? Is she entitled to that information?
She's not doing the hiring.
Okay?
Yeah, no, she's not.
Is she within her bounds to call this board secretary to get the applications for the candidates?
No.
Okay, got no, any yeses? The answer is no, she does not. She, as an individual, Valerie, does not. Now, is she entitled to see them as a board? Absolutely. That's the approach to take, is if there's questions about it, the superintendent can bring it to the board in closed meeting, whatever the case may be, to show the application. So the question is, I have questions about the applications. Could we review those at our board meeting where everybody's involved? And that's the approach you want to take. You're just calling up the board secretary. Can you imagine what that does with the board secretary? The position she's in, lots of pressure. And as I talked about, you know, she is entitled to see them as a board member, not an individual board member, as a member of the board. So, granted, you are hiring them. Ultimately, you're the hired, so you do have that right. Just, I don't want to say you can't go rogue and start asking for applications and that kind of thing as an individual board member. Another one. Board member Rex drops in on the superintendent to inform her about a complaint from her neighbor about a dangerous situation with a bus driver. Superintendent shares she will contact the transportation department to check things out. Rex shares that he's already investigating the issue by following the bus driver for the last 3 days and talking to a few students when they got off the bus. One is, why do you think he would do that?
Maybe gain info. Or trying to get info to present.
Probably told his neighbor he would do it.
Probably, and he's a neighbor. I mean, he wants to serve,
Right.
and there may be an issue, you don't know. But the superintendent already said that they would take care of it before that. What do you think the impact is? What's the consequences of him doing what he did? Making that investigation.
Well, he involved chain of command for one thing,
Correct. Yeah.
and that's not good, that's not building trust with your with your employees when you do something like that.
It could make it seem like he's out to get that particular
Could be.
employee, if that's hard, if I mean.
No, you're fine.
That could be, that's exactly right.
You're not putting a lot of confidence in your superintendent either to handle the situation.
That's right. Now, what happens to the next time something happens? Who's Rex gonna go to the next time? Or that neighbor, who's that neighbor gonna go to the next door man? Who's the neighbor gonna go right back to Rex as opposed to the superintendent? So as you said, you've kind of broken the chain of command there of what's the best approach to make that happen. So where we're getting at, you guys recognize that place, don't you? Okay? That's where you wanna be.
I'm feeling dizzy.
I couldn't get up to it. I can't ride that little cart going up to it, just claustrophobic. Can't do it. I love it up at the top, but I can't get there. So why you wanna be at that board's view, whatever, how high that is.
You're taking in the big picture.
Exactly, big picture. And one of the things that sometimes we get confused, and I use this a lot, is, and you've heard it, is the board shouldn't get in the weeds, but you have the responsibility to look in the weeds. Okay, there's a difference between getting in the weeds and looking in the weeds. That's kind of the evaluation part of it, and monitoring performance and that kind of thing. You just don't get in the weeds to do that. So we want to be at this high level as a board, Board of Education. So what's your job? You're focusing on what? What needs to be done in the district? And what are the ends that you want to accomplish? What are goals or whatever that's set up to be? It's his job to figure out how to make it done, how to get it done. And I'm not gonna say that you guys will agree every time on how it gets done. But that is his job. And supporting that and letting that happen. Also, you act by vote. By your governing documents that you've approved. That sets the direction for the board, for the superintendent to act and accomplish. So he puts the plans together, procedures, and all that, to make that happen, what you said you want to occur. And here again, superintendent takes direction from you, staff takes it from the superintendent, not the board. So, understanding those roles, and this is all in your policy, and in your book, or in your little packet on the right-hand side, are copies of all these policies we talked about. And I know it's really, really fun and exciting to read your policies. I know how much excitement you guys get reading your policies.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't read anything else in your policies, read section B. Okay? That talks about the roles and responsibilities of you, the superintendent. That's a real key part for your service, is section B. And these are your policies, your governing documents. This is what you are responsible for. Now, you may not write them all, but you're responsible for adoption of all that, starting with policies, the agendas, your CSIP, your budget, professional development, superintendent evaluation. That's what you use as your tools. That's your tools as a board. And they need to be all consistent and talk to each other and be aligned, so they're all talking about the same thing. Superintendent evaluation needs to be aligned with your CSIP, so you're all pulling the wagon in the same direction. And one of the things that's really important is, just because we talked about you have to have, you're acting as a board, you still have an individual voice. Never give up your individual voice as a board member. But it's still gotta get to the group voice ultimately. That's why it's really important to express opinions, express thoughts in board meetings, discussions, and stuff like that. You know, I don't, doesn't make a difference to me if it's 6-1 and you already know it's 6-1. It's important that people know what your thoughts are. Like I said, it may not go your way, but your individual voice is critical in your board meetings. So I encourage people to speak up, express your opinions, express your thoughts about it. One, it makes better decisions, much better decisions when you've got discussion and you've got different viewpoints. Because honestly, most of us all are trying to accomplish the same thing. We just may come about it from a different direction. Different perspectives, different backgrounds, different experiences. We all want the same thing, and that's what's best for kids, that you said before. Okay, there's your mission statement. Let's talk about it. What observations, what thoughts do you have about your mission statement? And I'm not making that from a critical standpoint, I mean, looking at it, what do you see?
I see a lofty goal.
Yeah?
That's one of those, that's almost one of those like, 100% of the time we're gonna do 100%, you know? But I guess it's a goal, it's the type of goal that you should have.
Right. What else? Does it accomplish what you want to accomplish?
Well,
Mission statement?
it's old.
Gotcha.
It's been around for quite a while, and
The nineties.
a lot of these guys probably, I don't know if you've ever seen it before.
Mhm.
You probably saw it, but probably never paid much attention to it, because it, it was posted all over the place, but it is old, and that's maybe something that, we do need to talk about.
Mhm. Sure.
So it becomes,
And I encourage you to address it and talk about it, even if you don't change it. Reaffirming it is just much of an action as it is to revise it or do something different. So it's important that you ever so often, particularly CSEP, that your CSEP goes to 24. Are you in tier 1 or tier 2? Do you
Tier
know?
1.
You're in tier, oh, lucky you.
Yeah.
Okay. I talked to the district yesterday, no, Friday, sorry. They're in tier 1 and they don't have a CSIP.
Oh.
I
We
take
do
it.
have a CSIP.
They have a CSIP, but it's 2014.
Oh my.
And so they're in tier 1. So they're scrambling
Yeah.
to put something together for that, so. But that's important to talk about and address it. And adopt it, reaffirm it. I don't encourage people to just willy-nilly change mission statements just because. They're very intentional, very strategic. That's what you need to do, so. I apologize, I'm not gonna read all this, but this is your expectation, your CSIP, those are your goals for CSIP. I don't know how long last time CSIP was changed, I know you adopted in 2019, I don't know if it's pretty much the same as it was even before that.
Well,
But
we made some improvements.
Here's the list of areas that you all, as a board, identified in your superintendent search process. This is what you were looking for in a new superintendent. Personally, I think they're really good. That's what you're looking for. And as you're doing superintendent evaluations and goals, these are the things you're looking for. How do we measure those? How do we build those into our either CSIP in 24 or superintendent evaluation, whatever the case may be, they're really good. And so I would keep those in mind about what specifically are you thinking about when you're talking about putting a plan together to improve academic achievement. Well, that's lofty, but that's something that we expect. And so, Marty said, you're going, oh my gosh, how do we do those?
Yeah.
Well, that's where he's putting the plan together about how to make that happen. The key thing here is delegation. I talked about it, we've said it 100 times already, letting the superintendent do their job. and run the district. Delegate that authority to him or her to make it happen. We've talked about all the duties and roles and responsibilities, that's what it is. Delegation, and that's hard to do, I'll tell you. Delegating is hard to do. Those of you who are in business know how hard that can be sometimes. Let somebody else do what you, they may not do it the way you want to do it. Superintendent's role is to implement. This sounds like I'm repeating it. I am repeating it because it's that important. Execute policies. You've adopted the policies, they execute. Communicate board expectations. You've set the direction. He needs to communicate that with staff and students to make sure they know to do that. Procedures align with that, and delegate the responsibility. That's his role. To do that. If you guys got questions you want to talk about anything, please, this is not, I don't want this to be a sit and get at all. This is your workshop. This is your workshop. So if you see a rabbit and you want to chase it a little ways, let's go. Totally. As long as we don't chase it from here to Springfield, we'll be here a little too long. Here's one. Board member Bob, who's worked in the construction industry for 23 years, construction of a new addition to the elementary building is nearly finished. After work one evening, Bob went through the new addition and created a punch list and sent it to the contractor. Is that his role?
Don't know.
No.
He's acting as an individual.
No? Yeah. What's the impact? And is there a better way to share? It's not bad that you got a construction guy on the board and you're building buildings, or an architect, or somebody like that. That's a good thing. That expertise is important. Not necessarily go out and do a punch list, but the board could say, Bob, would you like to go look at it with the contractor or the superintendent and give some feedback? Great, because Marty didn't know a thing about construction.
You're right.
Rhetorical question, but
No,
that's,
sorry.
I understand. But he may not, so that expertise that Bob's got is invaluable. It truly is. I mean, we had several architects in Springfield's board, and they were incredibly helpful to ask the right questions. So, you want to utilize his talents and his expertise, but it's not his role to go off, quote, rogue to do that. Okay. I was gonna mention a while ago, I'm gonna put a plug in for one of your employees, Glenn Moore.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, talk about a superstar.
They're not a big fan of Glenn.
I mean,
Everybody loves Glenn.
He's
yeah.
done so much for us that Center for Education
Yes.
Safety is just ridiculous. People ask for him.
We like him a lot, so we're keeping him right here, so
Yeah.
don't get any ideas.
We realize what an asset
Yes,
we have.
Yeah, he's awesome. I'm sorry I would chased a rabbit there,
That's
because I just
all
thought
right.
of that and I thought, we have people requesting him
He's
to be
awesome.
trained
Yeah.
all the time. So I'll try to convince him not to
Thank you.
raid or anything like that.
He really
See,
likes it
that's-
here.
That's one of the areas that Adam here has some expertise is, he's a fireman and knows a lot about buildings and,
Yeah.
stuff to do with safety and et cetera. And then Jeff one here
Jeff, one.
is a
Aw.
law enforcement patrolman. So, clearly that we've got people that have expertise that we can draw on.
Also, Adam cooks hamburgers regularly.
Okay.
That's why he
Let
has
me know
to be,
that, that's why
Yeah.
that's why he developed his fireman skills.
Yeah.
Well, obviously,
Cooking days.
Yeah,
so obviously, school safety is a key
Yeah.
part of, and
Very
I knew it
important.
was,
Very.
I knew it was, so thanks for letting us
Yeah.
abuse Glenn and use him all the time.
As long as you send him back.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. So, stakeholder concerns. How do you respond to staff, parents, or other community members when they approach you? And you don't get calls at all, I know. People don't see you at the grocery store and ask you, what the hell's wrong with the baseball coach? 'Cause this and that, or whatever, or what about this issue? How do you respond to those when you get them?
Well, I think you have to listen first.
Next, yeah.
And then you need to direct them to talk to the teacher, the principal, superintendent, go through the chain of command, tell them that that's how they need to handle it.
Okay?
And I found too that a lot of, like Coach said, just listening, a lot of times, people just wanna vent. And, you know, you just hear them out and then move forward from there.
You know, I've listened to people, like I said earlier, you thought you knew a lot before you got on. And so they bring up some good questions, and those questions allow me to go ask questions I didn't know, so it allows you to check in and gain information yourself, and sometimes you can give that information, you know, right back to that individual. And I think that makes them feel good that a board member can get, you know, give them an answer back, you know, not about employee or anything, but just a standard question. So it's,
I mean, that's the two things that's elected to the board that they expect as a community. One, you can fix my problem, and two, you know everything about the district. That's the expectation, that's what they think when you got elected to the board. You already knew all this stuff. Well, you know,
don't have, yeah.
you don't even know where the elementary school is sometimes. I mean, it's just, it's a learning process for you as much as it is for everybody.
I like to let the superintendent know that I was contacted by somebody. I think that's, I mean, not only direct them towards the right person, but let them know that you've been contacted.
Yep, absolutely. And we're gonna talk specifically about that in just a minute, about what that, and making sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I think with that is, I mean, you know, borderline over communicating those things to where he's not getting blindsided by things that maybe we've already heard, to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, and just make sure that he knows what, you know,
What's out there.
what's being talked and maybe what's coming his way, and gives him a minute to kind of collect his thoughts and whatever information he may need to try to collect as well.
No surprises.
No surprises.
Amen.
Big things, no surprises.
Amen.
Either way,
Yeah.
Sure.
you don't wanna read about it in the paper, or hear about it on the news, nor does he wanna hear about it blindside, like you said, somebody's coming for you with some, whatever issue it might be. So, another one, Vicky, an elementary teacher, was placed on a PIP, professional improvement plan, by the principal following her evaluation. She complained to board member Sally that the principal's picking on her. According to her, none of the other teachers in the building have improvement plans. Vicky wants board member Sally to talk to the principal. What does Sally do?
And it's not Vicky's, or it's not Sally's job to talk to the principal necessarily. I mean, it just needs to go the chain of command again, you know, goes to the superintendent, then he or she can move forward with it from there.
Okay, so if you're thinking of a line of chain of command, where would be the first place for Vicky to go? The principal? Which is a problem, maybe. I'm not saying it is a problem, but that may not be the place to start. The board is certainly not the place to start.
If she was put on the principal, it may not exactly be where she wants to.
That's right. That may not be, and they gotta think about where you send them based on what information you've got. That's back to listening and finding out those facts and details. It probably needs to start with the superintendent, referring Vicky to the superintendent. Now, will it get resolved there? Don't know. You know, then it may end up in your hands down the road, potentially. Hopefully not. But you got to follow, as you said, the chain and do that. Because the best place to start always is where? At the top. That's everybody's thought.
Yeah,
Start at the top. That's where I'm gonna get it done. That's not what we want. Here's another one. As Sam pulls into your driveway, as you pull into your driveway, your neighbor Sam approaches you. Sam believes his son is not being treated fairly by the basketball coach, who is also the math teacher, which never happens, right? This has never occurred in Willow Springs, right?
Coach, I'll certainly want the math teacher.
No, no. I started to say, we never had a basketball coach who teach math.
We've had a golf coach.
Always has to look at the scoreboard, never knows the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam wants to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk with the coach, just to get things out in the open. However, he wants a witness to be part of the conversation. Sam would like you to be that person. He didn't mention it, but you're pretty certain he voted for you. That's what he do.
You can say, that's just exactly what I'd like to do.
Is this back to what she
Thanks for
said has
asking.
run?
Yeah,
The other
that's
direction.
exactly
Yeah.
right.
But that's not gonna make Sam feel any better. Whether the problem is real or not, doesn't make any difference. Sam thinks there's a problem. You gotta, like you said, you gotta listen to him.
Well, he needs to be directed to the athletic director, when he needs to be directed.
That's the first place. Okay. This is what your policy says, the hierarchy of that. Start with the staff, whatever that is, principal, superintendent, board. That's the kind of a four-step process. And depending on where you are in that is where you have to start. So keep that in mind. This is something that community, teachers, staff need to also understand, because they don't. I mean, it's just, like I said, they want to start at the top because that's the quickest place to go. Like, you can't fix it. You can't fix it. I'm not saying you can't start the process and refer it to where it needs to be. And the one thing I can't overemphasize is, just because you refer it to the superintendent or what, to get it in the right order, doesn't mean you just abdicate your responsibility to the whole thing. You want to know what results come from it. And you're entitled to let me know, superintendent, what is resolved. What's happening with it. So you can't just pass it and forget it. Always follow up.
So I got a question on that.
Yeah.
So if a person comes to you and then you pass it that and then you tell your superintendent that you want to know, are you not acting as an individual board member requesting that information and not as the whole board? I mean, how is that different than somebody wanting the applications or something like that when you say, I want you to let me know how this turns out as an individual board member?
If I was a superintendent, I'd let the whole board know what's going on.
Okay, so the burden would be then on him
Yeah,
to regroup us as
yeah.
its information.
Just so he keeps you informed of what's happening, because if they didn't get resolved from you, they're gonna go Jeff,
Right.
potentially. So it's important for the board to know and communicate, we're gonna talk about that in a minute too, how much information do you wanna be knowledgeable of? I'm just saying, you wanna follow up
Right.
to make sure it didn't fall through the cracks somewhere, and it just makes them madder and more upset because no one even addressed it. That's what I'm talking about, follow up.
Sure.
But that's a communication process, how much communication do you want? We talked about these. As you're responding to customers, listen to them, like you said, sometimes they just want to vent. They're just mad about something and just let them talk. Paraphrase, repeat back what they said in your own words. Is this what you mean? What I'm hearing from you is this. For some reason that somebody hearing it from another person saying the same thing, I don't know, maybe it's calming, I don't know what it is, but you're taking an interest in what they're.
It makes them feel like you're understanding at least
Exactly.
where they're coming from.
That's right. Acknowledge your feelings. Hey, I know you're upset. I know you're mad. I know this bothers you. And that's okay. I understand.
That's what my wife tells me about our daughters.
Yeah, I had those too. I feel your pain. And then give them instructions on how's the best way to solve this, following that KO policy on the process. And make sure they understand it. Here's how the best way to get that resolved. Have you talked to your teacher? Have you talked to your principal? Yes, or whatever the case, you know. You need to start there. Direct, like I said, ask for follow-up. Make sure it doesn't get dropped and fell through the cracks somewhere. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the impact of board intervening on behalf of the staff or community members. When you get involved in the process, what effect is that? What does that do when you get in the middle of the process? And you guys have said some of it already a couple times.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, I mean, you're immediately stepping on, whether it be the principal or Marty's job or whatever, I mean, you're immediately kind of discrediting their authority and how they handle, you know, the chain of command and who's in line to handle that situation.
And do you think that gets around?
Of course. That's a
Absolutely.
small, that's a small town.
I know. If you want something done, go talk to Jeff. He'll help you.
Yep.
Or you go talk to Mac, he'll help you. Because it's either happened or something like that.
I was gonna say, it carries over to the next one.
Absolutely.
It just keeps
Like you
going.
said, it's small, they know. They all know you guys. They see you every day.
Just an overall negative effect on staff morale.
Yeah. And if I'm sitting there as a principal and knowing that the problem should come to me as a principal, but the board's involved, why should I even worry about it? I mean, if I know it's gonna be taken somewhere else, I'm just gonna pass it on anyway. When they could have solved it potentially and resolved the issue. You know, as you said, it breaks that chain. And it makes them, what's the point? If it's gonna get, you know, board members already involved, what good is it for me to be involved if a board member's already taking care of it, or trying to take care of it?
That's probably the hardest thing to resist, is because we all like to fix problems when they come to us.
They're friends,
Yeah.
they're family. I mean, like I said, you see them every day. You wanna help them. And you want to help solve the problem, absolutely.
We think the quickest way we can resolve this is just go take
Go
care
do
of it. Yeah.
I think one thing that I try to, you know, like Marty, he's got a doctorate and 20 years experience in education. I run equipment. You know what I mean? Like, you know, Jeff arrests people. We gotta make sure, like, we don't know how to resolve the things
Right.
that we think we might be able to, or be able to do with the
Absolutely.
way Marty or some of these, you know, principals that are trained in handling some of that stuff.
I mean, that's kind of a curse from a board standpoint, but it's also a credit in the fact that you've got diverse experience here on the board, whether it's law enforcement, fire protection, whatever, coaching, whatever. You've got varied experience on the board, which is great, but none of it is usually education, even though Mac's been there. Let's go.
Probably
I won't say
dabbled in
that.
Dabble.
He dabbled. I don't know if I call it
In
education.
education.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a few.
just a few. So, there is an impact. If there's confusion among the roles between the board and the superintendent, it creates confusion. We talked about that, sends no confidence in the staff members, superintendent to some degree. You know, if you're gonna take care of it, you're gonna give him the chance to solve it. They can't lead, they can't be leaders, make decisions. If they're gonna get either undercut or it's gonna start at the top anyway, that's a trigger happy. And it's gonna create distrust in the collaboration between you, the superintendent, and the rest of the staff. So, it's really important that everybody understands their role. Did we go dead?
Well, it was an older clicker. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, so how do we reduce that? Some of those challenges. Let's see if it goes now. Know your policies. Follow your policies, they are your friend. Trust me, they are your friend. So, follow your policies. Ensure that everybody is in agreement on the priorities that you're trying to achieve. Superintendent and the board on all your district priorities and outcomes. Make sure you're on the same page. Makes it a lot easier when you're on the same page. Respect each other's leadership roles, your role as the governing body and the administrative body, what those roles are. Ask governance questions as a board. I think it's on left-hand side. There's some questions behind the presentation. Just on some of it, just asking the right questions. Yeah, governance level questions. It's just ideas on how to ask some questions as a board. At that 50,000-foot level, what questions to ask. Those are just more verbiage than it is specific question. Be proactive on educating the public on the process. You know, I learned very quickly when I got phone calls, if I kept forwarding them or pushing them to somebody else, they quit calling. Because I'm not going to take care of it. I'm going to hurt it maybe, but I'm not going to take care of it. So if you haven't gone to the principal first, that's where I'm going to send you. So you just will go there first. And that's a habit. That's just habits. Like I said, that's hard because you're dealing with family, friends, and acquaintances.
Well, I can tell you from an administrative standpoint, as an administrator, you want them to come to you. That's really frustrating when you hear it for the first time from a board member. I mean, you'd much rather them come to you, because a lot of times it is a simple
Oh, yeah.
solution that the administrator or the teacher can take care of in short order. But for whatever reason, the community sometimes would rather go to a familiar face or a board member. But
And most of the time, it's not that big a problem. I mean, it is to them, no question, it is to them.
yeah,
But it can be solved much easier on the
Sure.
front line than
Sure.
it can be through the bureaucracy of board. And I don't know if you all know Susan Goldhammer, but she always preaches about, you know, you need a list of 10 ways to tell people, no, I can't do that. Very politely, very nicely, you know, here's how you do that. And be real polite about doing that. Okay. If you don't, remember that, this isn't in there, if you don't remember anything, the whole point here is stay in your lanes. Don't cross over when you get on head-on collisions, don't you, Jeff? If you don't stay in your lanes. And that's stay in your board lane, stay in your administration lane. We just went through, what, 20 slides? If you just remember this one, it's a good night. Okay, to this point, if you remember that. So, okay, questions up to there about the board's role and the superintendent's role, or things you want to talk about in more detail. As Willow Springs bears, board of directors, are there issues there that you guys need to talk about, or we can help, or questions you got?
I feel like.
I'm not saying throw dirty laundry out on the flood table, but I'm just, you know, this is your opportunity to communicate.
I don't think we've had a big issue with this kind of stuff, but we all need reminders, you know, me included, that, you know, the proper protocol and how to handle when people come to you.
Yeah.
And once you establish that, the more you establish that, the easier it is.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, consistent with
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. Consistency is really important here. It's really important. But like I said, you know, I'm glad to hear that that's not, unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of districts, but that's awesome that it is here. But like I said, it's you guys are a whole new team. You don't, this sounds like I'm picking on Jeff and Jeff, but
It's okay.
it's a new board. It really is. It's a new board with a new superintendent.
So it's a new board, we've got a new board president, we've got a new superintendent, we've got new principals,
yeah.
new assistant principals. So, you know, there's a lot of new.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what Marty was saying.
Very
We've got a
new.
whole new leadership team
Yes.
in place at Willow Springs. Now's the chance to make it what you want.
Yeah, it's time to capitalize, you can capitalize on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunity, for sure.
Exactly. Challenges, but that creates opportunity. Absolutely. Okay. Do you want to take a break for a minute, or do you want to?
You guys good? You need a quick break?
In case you guys thinking it might be warm in here,
Yeah,
It is.
the air is broke.
I'm sweating.
yeah, it froze up this afternoon, so that's why the door is open, because it's really nice out in the lobby, and the bathroom is very, very cold,
And
so.
I'm not helping with hot air, so that's not,
Well, that's a complaint for the superintendent, and we don't have air.
I've heard that. Thank you. I'll take care of it.
Pass that through the
Did you
public.
pass that on?
Pass it on to Mike Bailey.
Yeah.
He'll be on in the morning.
I saw him down here today.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what it
we
was
didn't
about.
catch it at that time.
Yeah.
you could put a conference call right there and everybody
Yeah.
could say something.
Let's get him on the line right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Then, let's talk about one of your other roles as a board, and that is to monitor performance. As part of your role, and that is measuring how well you're doing as a district. What those expectations are, how the goals being measured. Your CSIP and even the superintendent's evaluation, how are things going? How are we doing as a district? How do you know if any progress, how do you know if the needle's moving at all? Okay? It's not so much if I'll know it when I see it, it's systematic, intentional, where are we? Are we moving in the northeasterly direction and things improving? And if not, what do we do? How do we deal with that? And another thing is the question that you all have to address among yourselves is how often should the board be updated on those kind of goals and measurements? You want it every month? You want it every quarter? You want it, it's your call. How often do you want to know that kind of information so you can stay ahead of the game?
Which makes me think, by the way, talking about the specific thing, about the thing that we talked a lot about the last couple of years, developing the
The
scorecard.
balanced scorecard.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which is what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
which I think is a real good idea, and I
It
guess
is.
that's still in the,
We've still got it, and we update it as much as we can. We've got the new testing data just came out, so sometime this fall, for sure, we'll take a look at that and see how we're doing.
How often, I mean, I'm
I-
not trying to put you on. the spot
No, I
because
know.
you've been in,
I think the
55
idea,
days.
I think the idea was to do it quarterly.
Okay.
I don't know that we've been doing it quarterly, but I think that would be a nice, about the time kids get the report card, then we take a look at our report card as well and see how we're doing. We won't always have the data points that are really gonna move the needle, but when we do, it'll be interesting to look
Yeah.
at.
But that's important, if you all are on the same page with
Yeah.
respect to that reporting. So Jill, when do you expect that kind of information?
And that makes me think, about every month, we have a program or two that presents to the board about that program.
Mhm.
And, perhaps they could build into their presentation, what goals they have, and then what measurement or progress, simple stuff that we can understand.
So really, Matt.
Really basic.
Instead of sitting there going,
Was that?
I wasn't intentionally looking at Scott down there.
I feel you.
But no, I mean, just management
Yes,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll chime in on that, I mean, you guys kind of laughed about that, something we'd understand. That's not,
No.
that's real.
Yeah.
Because these people have more acronyms than we have mosquitoes. And
Unfortunately. yeah.
understanding when you're talking about ESSER, you're talking about all this, what the heck are you talking about? We don't know that.
Yeah, we
That
mentioned,
doesn't come up in the highway patrol report in the morning.
You guys probably have some
What
acronyms
those
too,
are.
though.
We had a bunch of them.
I know, I'm sure you do too,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
but
Just worse than education, I feel for you.
just like you've mentioned CSIP several times,
Yeah.
Who
Who knows what CSIP stands
say
for?
that. And,
What it stands for, I'm I don't have a good enough knowledge to explain it to you what it is. That's how bad I don't know what
Yeah, I
it is.
kinda
And
understand.
it is nice to have something other than like standardized testing to look at
Yes.
as far as how the school district is doing.
Yes.
Because I mean, that's just one piece of the
That's right.
pie.
Yeah.
And,
That's right.
and that, I know when I got on the board, that was one thing that you just don't know. I mean,
Yep.
they hand you, I can barely spell iReady, and they hand me these things, like, oh, okay, well, what do I do with this,
Yep.
And you go on, so yeah, something like that would be beneficial to us, as far as, accountability to us, and if we're doing the right, taking the right steps, or concrete steps to, make everybody's life better, like the mission statement says.
Mhm. I mean, it's, even the first couple of years, it's kind of a deer in headlight a little bit, just trying to figure out all those things, what are you talking about? And asking questions is great, that's the whole point. But it takes a while just to get on a level that you're comfortable with, to ask questions. What's I ready? You don't wanna ask that, I wouldn't wanna ask that question because we've been using it for 5 years. I don't wanna feel like I don't know what's going on, but because you're probably not the only one. So, that's part of the getting involved in the board meetings and discussion and asking questions, that's really, really important. Thing falls asleep. Okay, so superintendent, and I'll expand the superintendent to administration, even, just like you talked about, Mac. Providing data to show that improvement. It's not gut, it's data. It's factual information that shows what it is. In a context that you just said, we all understand. Because you can snow us big time. Just get in that vernacular, and it's, make sure it's easy to understand, like I said, explaining it, and make sure your data and reports are consistent with your CSIP. That's the whole point of alignment in this whole thing, is making sure everything's aligned, including reporting that's out there. And it's imperative that, this is something I preached for years, report the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't just give me the good stuff, and don't spin the bad stuff so it sounds like it's good.
Yeah.
Okay? If it's bad, put it on the table, let's address it, and how do we move in a different direction? Don't, liars figure and figures lie, okay? So I can make anything bad look pretty good or acceptable if I don't give all the information. You're entitled, the community's entitled to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because that's the only way you improve. Have to do something different. If that didn't work, do something different. So I think that's an expectation to me, that I always had with the superintendent. Don't just tell me what I want to hear, tell me where we are.
We need to know what we're voting on.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's an important one for me, that we had like.
All the information.
Kind of, I like the brutally honest,
Yeah.
let's get it out there.
And
You
it-
didn't know that.
That's a shock.
And it's not always fun.
No.
Yeah.
It's not. But you're making the big bucks to learn about make tough decisions. And so I think it's important that you have every side of the issue put out there, the good and the bad. So I'm just a big believer in brutal honesty of what it is. Facts are facts. The data doesn't lie. The data doesn't lie. Okay. Any other questions about any of that stuff with performance monitoring? Sounds great that you got a dashboard, utilizing that to
Yeah.
provide some of that information, that's great. I don't know if that's on your website, where a community can see it too.
No, but that's something we could look at.
Yeah, that's important to them too.
Sure.
So, let's talk a little bit about communications. And this is gonna be a big discussion among yourselves, of some of the communication protocols, okay? What protocols do you want? Communication between board members? Communication between board, superintendent? What do you want that to be? Who communicates to the superintendent? All 7 of you? You go through the board president? These aren't recommendations I'm throwing out, these are things that you as a board need to be all on the same page. How do you want to communicate with your superintendent? And next thing I'm gonna talk about is how do you want the superintendent to communicate with you? And maybe we'll go there and then have discussion. How often you want the superintendent to talk to you? Every day? Weekly, monthly? Just when the building's on fire? You know, I honestly, there are boards out there that don't call me unless there's an emergency. I'll see you next Thursday night at the board meeting. Now, that's not governance responsibility, but there are boards out there like that, that are so hands-off that it's just, I'll be there for an hour at the board meeting, and that's it. So, how often do you want to communicate among each other, with your superintendent? And he'd communicate with you. What's reasonable?
It's already.
And I'm not saying you have to solve it tonight, but that's a discussion.
Right.
That's
I
important.
can only reference the previous, superintendent and stuff, and it was a pretty open line between any board member and that superintendent, and that's, it seemed to work well. He wanted that communication there from everybody, so I think, it's something Marty's gonna have to weigh in on, we're just gonna have to, we need to find a middle ground that works, good. He may only wanna hear from Matt.
Well, as much as I like Matt. No, I would want that open line from all.
Yeah, and I don't want you to feel like you have to come through me every time you need to feel like you need to talk to Marty.
Some things that, questions that belong to Mac, and some others questions that belong to Marty, so.
Like Jerry mentioned earlier, everybody has a voice, and
Yeah.
that's, you are one body, but I do like to hear from, when we've had our meetings earlier this summer, it was just nice to hear each individual perspective on things.
I thought that was really good.
I
too.
wouldn't wanna stop that necessarily.
I-
Not that you need
And
to.
I like the email.
We want you to
Call us though.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Please no.
else.
Yeah.
Only phone calls.
The mayor report.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's already.
Yeah, he emails us every Friday.
Uh-huh.
Kinda
So
how-
what's going on?
Yeah, I do really like that,
Yeah.
just a snapshot of the week and
Yep.
kind of what's going on.
Well, any feedback is
We had
good,
that too.
'cause, if I can make it better or change the
I
format.
need to
or
read them
whatever.
first.
Yeah. Take a look at them, Scott, let me know.
As soon as I read them, I'll let you know.
Because this is really important, everybody's on the same page. Because you don't want a board member thinking they don't have the ear to the superintendent or vice versa. And so, like you said, every input's important to hear.
But, I'm not opposed to if it's something critical or something came up that we get something, I don't wanna wait till Friday
No.
to hear, like you said, we don't wanna hear it in the newspaper or
Exactly,
on something
yeah.
the next day. I'm for, if you need to get a hold of all of us or do whatever, then make it happen.
Yeah. I would,
The important thing is not the frequency or that, the important thing is everybody's on the same page. That's what's important. It made a difference to me whether it's daily, weekly, hourly, monthly, whatever, as long as you all are comfortable with whatever that is, to do that. Okay, if you got a question for a principal or a teacher, where do you go? Do you go directly to the teacher or the principal? You go to the superintendent? You go to the board president? How would you deal with that if you've got a question?
But acting as a board member,
Yeah, you're a board member.
not a parent. You're acting as a board member.
good question, Matt.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up, Matt, because you have a different hat.
Right.
You don't, this is me speaking, not anybody else. You're a parent first. Always a parent first. So when you're talking to your teacher, between you and the teacher about your kid, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as a board member.
Okay.
Because you don't give up that, granted, you've got board tattooed on your forehead.
No matter what.
No matter what, you do, but that hat needs to turn when you go to parent-teacher conferences and stuff like that. That's your parent, always first. And you're gonna protect your kid? to the end. Skyward. So no, I'm talking about as a board member. You got a question just about, I don't know.
I wouldn't feel comfortable.
I read it.
Yeah,
I just
I
don't
mean-
think I read it.
I don't know that I would feel comfortable contacting a teacher individually, but I'm not saying this is the right thing, but I mean, as far as like emailing a principal, I wouldn't, I don't know, you tell me.
So this is, I think this is a tough question.
It is a
because
very tough question.
We live in a town of
I
2,000
know.
people, and we're gonna go sit next to one of these at a basketball game, and we're gonna do, and you're gonna talk, and you're gonna have conversations. It's really, you know, if you're talking about sending an email and having a direct thing, you know, like, of course, you know, that's something, but there's a lot of times you sit down next to somebody and you just have a conversation with them, and so that, I don't.
There's a difference between, you have 3 principals, and I had 55.
Right.
Wow.
Okay, there's a difference. Because I don't know some of them, never met them. So I'm not really gonna call them out of the clear blue asking that question. But you're gonna sit at a baseball game, you're gonna sit right next to them at the baseball game. And I think it's gonna happen, period. Now, the question's going to be, if you're talking to them directly, should Marty know about the discussion?
I would think, depending on how far it went, I mean, how deep the discussion went towards the subject matter.
Yeah, or if there was any kind of friction in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a judgment call. No question about, you know, Marty didn't want to be surprised when the principal comes to him and goes, I just had this meeting with Jeff, and he was picking at this stuff big time. I didn't say it was Jeff. I didn't say it was Jeff.
Like, I know like sometimes like the iReady thing, the teachers that are doing that can help you understand it, you know?
So that would be a
Yeah.
clarifying question, not a, I've got an issue.
Yeah, it would be
Right.
like, so
I think
this,
that's a big.
so like this
there's a big
data
difference
does this,
there.
is that why?
So-
You know, and they be, oh, and they explain that to you
Yeah.
that way. And it's not like an accountability thing, it's just trying to understand the information that you're giving in the board packet.
And as any good lawyer will tell you, the answer is it depends.
And then charge $1,000.
And they charge $1,000. But I'm saying is sometimes just letting Marty know that I got a question about iReady, Marty, go talk to the teacher. And he knows that it's happening. So it's not a surprise to him, but he, and probably will say, go talk to him. I may not know about it either. He may not understand it as well as that teacher does, obviously. Teacher knows it backwards and forwards. Go to the source, if it's just like that kind of thing. But it's always good if Marty knows, because I know my superintendent, a lot of times, he just wants to know if I'm in the building. If I'm going out to Weller School, he just wants to know I'm there, because he's gonna get a call from the principal going, why the hell is a board member out in my school? Well, I'm just walking around, maybe because my kid's there, maybe because I just hadn't been at Weller for 3 months, I just want to see what was going on. Not to pick anything, I wasn't even looking for anything, just, I like to be visible. As a board member, they want you to be, I mean, teachers want you out there, a lot of times. They want you to see what they're doing, the good things they're doing. But it's still that fine line.
Yeah, but wouldn't you want to give the superintendent a heads up before you ever set foot out there?
100%. Yep, 100%. I think that's, and I know that's a burden on him from the standpoint of all these calls that may come in, but I think that's,
It's okay.
to me, I think that's a protocol that's really, really
Right.
important,
Yeah.
that he knows what's happening in the district. But chain of command is important, vitally important, but I think just communication among staff members and you and everybody, that's not a bad thing. I just don't think that's a bad thing. But there are processes you go through when it's complaints, concerns and stuff like that. It's different than educating. I don't understand iReady. I can't spell iReady. What does it do? You know, you're not going out to the classroom and going, that was dumb. Why are you teaching your kids like that? That's not what you're doing. That's not the point, you know. And
I think a lot of this gray area that you're talking about, you know, I think it comes down to trust.
Yep.
There's a lot of it. I think if you develop good trust, I don't think you have a lot of issues there on gray areas.
I think that's a really good point. Okay. Okay,
See me back up.
that's all right. I don't know what the last one was. Okay. Let's just go to this communication. Opportunity, challenge, atrocity, I don't care what you want to call it, I don't know, social media. And I don't know who all's on social media, it doesn't make any difference to me, I'm not a social media person. But it is a place that creates problems, or can also be a great tool. So it's a curse and a blessing all at the same time for a lot of things. So, just some thoughts about, I don't know who all's on it, doesn't make a difference. One is you have to speak as an individual, not as a board member. So even if you get at the front, you say, I'm not speaking for the board, but, or I'm not speaking for the board, however, I can tell you right now, as soon as you say but and however, the first part's gone. They've totally, you changed the topic. So be very conscious about how you phrase that kind of thing, because as soon as you say that, you've taken that away. And now it's the issue. So just a thought when you say that, but you gotta say it. You gotta say, I'm speaking as a parent, or I'm speaking as whatever. You have to say that. But I'm just, word to the wise, after but, they don't hear anything else. They forgot the first part. But it's like a disclaimer, almost. You've got to say it. Refrain from deliberations. Sometimes that implies that you haven't made up your mind yet, how you're gonna vote, your position on stuff. Don't put that on social media until the board's made a decision. It's not the place to have conversation about what you're gonna do. You wanna report on things that have happened. Things that have already happened by the board, and report on those. Don't share your dirty laundry out there. Jeff's crazy, he wants to do this. That's not so, I mean, it happens all the time. All the time. So, don't put your complaints or concerns out on social media. One, it never goes away, and two, it's just not the place for it. Released information, I mentioned that, only address stuff that the board's already decided. That's water under the bridge. It's public knowledge. Probably isn't very sexy, because it's already done, but that keeps you guys safe. I don't know if you use your own email, or personal email, or district email, or Facebook pages, or how you would do that. I don't know if you have a use policy, I'm sure you do, for social media. Follow it, stick with it, know what it is. And don't put out hearsay. Make sure the information you're retweeting or posting Facebook that you see, oh, that's really, really interesting. You need to make sure that information is accurate, verified, and real before you do it, even though it sounds interesting, because once you do it, you've endorsed it. You've endorsed it as soon as you retweet it. So be comfortable and confident that what you're retweeting is actually factually accurate. From experience, I've been burned on that one. Thought that was really, really interesting. It was a bunch of propaganda that was out there, took a position that, well, it seemed supportive, but there was nothing behind it. No data, no support, no research, no nothing. Therefore, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Instagram at all. Okay. Anything up to this point? Questions, things you want to talk about, rabbits you want to chase?
Yeah. You guys got anything else?
Okay. Let's move on to agendas, one of your governing documents. And talk a little bit about who develops the agendas and who determines what's gonna be on the agenda. So I think your policy says officers will consult with the superintendent to put the meeting agendas together. Now, why is it important for the superintendent and the board president to put the agenda together?
Because the president's representing the board.
Yeah, exactly.
We want a smooth meeting. We don't want controversy and all
Mhm.
kinds of, we want things to run smooth and things to get accomplished.
Yeah. How long do your board meetings usually last?
Very, couple hours.
Yeah.
We're in a new era.
I mean,
We're not sure yet.
Yeah.
I-
Check back in a few
I
months.
can tell you, I've been in a 24-minute board meeting and I've been in a 7-hour board meeting.
Oh, wow.
And neither one of them are right. Both of them are totally wrong.
Yeah.
So, there's not a right number, it's how much information you need and what has to be done to do business, because it is a business meeting. And I know you all know it's not a public meeting.
And agenda stuff is probably one of the things that would, guide, like if one of you have something you wanna talk to the superintendent about, if it's like gonna be an agenda item, then I'd kinda like to know about it also. Other than that, I probably don't need to know, it doesn't need to go through me.
So that's a question, that's a really good protocol to understand, is if you want an agenda item on, what's the process? Do you go to Mac or do you go to Marty or the board secretary? Whatever your policy says, that's what you wanna follow.
I think out of a courtesy for that position, I think I wanna let you know, we've elected you to lead us, and we're gonna, I'm gonna let you know what my thoughts are, and then the same with Marty. I mean, it's
Yeah.
gonna be probably, for me personally, I'd feel more comfortable twofold, making sure that both of you guys are aware of how I feel, or if I think it needs to
Yeah,
go to that level. That's-
That sounds
And I would
fine.
urge you
Yeah.
to honor board members' requests for agenda items.
yeah.
I mean, it's just, I think you have that right to do that, or responsibility even further, to do that.
But if you've got a question for Marty or something that somebody asked you, and, if it's not an agenda item, or, something that might end up on the agenda, I don't need to know about it.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know some of it's going to be, depending on what the item is. I wanna put on the agenda item, let's close all the libraries.
Yeah.
Something that is gonna create controversy or something, that needs some discussion before you just slap it on an agenda. Because, as you guys know, anything you say is gospel. If it's from a board member. So that means, you're thinking about doing that. No, it's difficult to have board retreats. Because you can't just think outside the box, and go, well, I think we ought to go to year-round schools.
Yeah. What does that look like?
What does that look like? Well,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, what's the headlines in the newspaper say? Matt wants to go to year-round school. That's not what I said. What I said was, it's worth a discussion, and or 4-day weeks. That's coming. Those kind of things. That's discussion strategically you wanna have, not just flippantly talk about that. But that's not something, you just throw it on the agenda. That takes thought, that takes ideas, but as soon as you talk about it in a retreat, it tends to grab headlines just because. I love retreats, I love having retreats, but you're guarded sometimes because you can't say things about what ifs. Not that you support them, it's just what if. What if we went to 4 days a week? What would that look like? If we went to year-round school, what would that look like? Well, that's great discussion topics, but it doesn't mean you want to do them. But that's just, but I would honor requests and know what that process is. If it needs to go through Mac, great. Needs to go right straight to Marty, great. Just make sure you all know and everybody's consistently on the same page. But be sure to set a deadline for agenda items to be put out there. If You know, obviously, you can't just come up with something today for tomorrow night's meeting. You know, you've got some notice that you've got to do, and you just can't simply add stuff to the agenda that night. Or even, you can do it less than 24, but it's gotta be an emergency. Gotta be an emergency. So that's, the agenda is a purpose. A sunshine law requirement that people have the opportunity to come speak and see what you're talking about. So that's why the agenda is really, really important, to let people know what's priority to you, what's important to you guys. Your agenda tells you that. Here's what you're talking about. When you got a question about something on the agenda, who do you call? And when do you ask the question?
Before the meeting.
Who do you ask?
Well, I guess I asked him already.
Yeah.
What do you want? Is that the way you want, is that the protocol you want?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Mac's gonna work with Marty putting this together, but ultimately Marty's on the keyboard. Marty's structure and all that stuff, you know, so my thought process would be Marty, if you have a question.
Yeah,
And, you know, and need clarification on something, but
because he's probably gonna have more information about it than I am.
Ideally, I've got
Yeah,
the details for each of those, and we do a narrative on that agenda that tells you a little bit of the details, but
Mhm.
if you had further questions, I feel like, if I don't know those, then I can go find before
the answer, yeah.
the board meeting, yeah.
And I think that's a really good point, and that is before the board meeting, of getting those questions. For a couple of reasons. One is you don't want to, embarrass the superintendent or staff at the board meeting. Back to no surprises. I know my motive was, I'm gonna call Jeff and go, hey, I'm gonna ask you about iReady at the board meeting. So I'm just giving you a heads up, or whoever you talk to, whatever the process is, I'm gonna ask that question. And you may give me the answer already, right now, but I'm gonna ask it anyway in the board meeting, because I want the public to know that I've asked that question. Because they need to know that answer, and not just you.
And I think the conversation amongst the board's good too, when you ask that question.
And I think it's a responsibility of either Mac or whomever it is to share those questions with the rest of the board. Jeff had this question about iReady. Here's a discussion, and that's shared by him. Because you need to copy the board secretary and all that kind of stuff to make sure it's on the record, because it's a document. If he shares it with the whole board, it becomes a archived document. But it's important that the rest of the board knows that question, or that issue, or that answer. So sharing that with the whole board is really critical.
I think that depends on what the question is, though, isn't it? Sometimes, I mean, just like Scott might have a question about iReady. That's not something that Marty needs to communicate to the whole board, is it, that Scott had a question about what does this mean on iReady? I mean, really, I mean.
No, but there was a legitimate one last week, or whenever that was before, and we kind of followed that
Mhm.
You address it in an email.
Right, yeah.
And you're right, I think it doesn't have to be necessarily everything. The depth of the question, the scope of the question, the impact of the question. You know, is that something that Marty and Mac are gonna have to decide? Is that something all seven of you need to know? Or if it's just I don't say, no question's not important, but it's not a critical question to something, which is true. But I think my first thought is making sure the board should know this or shouldn't know that. That's a question mark that you've gotta
Yeah.
make that decision. And Marty may send it to his assistant super or the principal. You'll get a better answer from the principal if you just go directly to him. At least he knows
Right.
and has directed you to that. If it's a budget item, not a budget item, but a specific item on the agenda. I got a question about athletic program. I'll just pick that. Well, no one's gonna know more about it than he is, the coach or the athletic director. So, you know, it gets directed to him or her, that's, but here again, it's still, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't, obviously superintendents have different management styles. They can be a check valve, or they can be a, you know, nothing goes through anywhere except through me. There are some like that. It's not here at all. Or vice versa. Everything's got, you know, it's just, it's a team of 8. Y'all got to work together as a team. And it sounds like you guys do. How does everybody get the same information? Okay, superintendent evaluation. One of your key documents again. Really important that everybody knows what the superintendent evaluation looks like, says, and is included in it as a board. And there's no surprises to the superintendent. So, it's not a one-time deal, guys. It's a process, it's a year-long process, superintendent evaluation. I know you culminate it in January when you do your kind of summative assessment, but this should go on every, you know, however often you decide, quarterly, whatever, updates that you want from the superintendent. But you gotta start with all of you being on the same page of what the expectations are of your superintendent. And doesn't make any difference what tool you use. I think you sent me a copy of the one you use now. They're all okay, as long as everybody understands them and knows how they work, okay? Plan's not, no, the format's not as important as identifying the goals and the measures that are there. How they're written down and how they're put down there is important, but it's not critical. Making sure everybody's on the same page is absolutely critical, so that he knows what he's supposed to be doing, or what he's supposed to be accomplishing. Because that's what you're gonna hold him accountable for come January. And so, that's something you need to be thinking about now.
Yeah, that is. Are you happy with that instrument?
Well, it's
never-
similar to the one that we did as building administrators,
Yeah.
too, and no, I'd be interested in seeing I've never seen any other options other than a
Are we talking about
reflective
the superintendent evaluation form?
That's what, yeah.
I had to read every question about 6 times to even try to begin to understand what it was asking
Exactly.
me to evaluate it.
Exactly.
Probably not ideal then, is
It's
it?
Yeah,
full
it's
of
tough.
educational jargon.
Yep.
And
It needs to be more practical.
I think
We
it's
need to be looking for something
I
else.
think
then.
it's the DESI.
I
I think
think
it's the DESI.
Is it the DESI model?
I think
Well,
it is too.
that doesn't
DESI
shock me,
model.
unfortunately.
Very
So,
wordy.
and it doesn't have to
Just
be
do
that
A, B, C, D.
complicated
Yeah.
at all.
I
Just
agree.
give me a
And
thumbs
I
up or
think,
thumbs down.
I think that if you look for other
Yeah,
instruments and, you know, that we could all understand.
And
Okay.
Mark, we can help you with that
okay,
easily,
great,
with either models or even help you put one together.
yeah.
Whatever you want to
super.
do. We do superintendent evaluations all the time.
Okay.
Because of the
Because I-
evaluations, we help you with the process.
Right.
I remember my first year on the board, looking at that thing and thinking, and like, the expectation is we're to respond to about every one of those, you know, with evidence. And it didn't happen.
I couldn't understand what was asking me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll be reaching out to you. and-
Yeah, we can help with that.
Okay,
And
great.
it is
Yeah.
so important, but it's
Yeah.
also so confusing and overwhelming
Yeah,
that it's not effective. Because you're just not gonna do that. So, you know, now's the time to be thinking about it.
Okay,
As you're starting the year. You just need 2 or 3 or 4 max indicators, okay? You don't need to measure them on 27 different
yeah.
performance measures. He's already responsible for everything in the district, period. I mean, he is, he's responsible for everything, but you can't measure him on everything because he can't focus on everything. So, you know, limit what's the most important indicators that you want to be measured on, and the board wants to know, and focus on that. Obviously, we're here for student learning and district improvement. That's why we're here. And so, obviously, some of those are gonna be important to that. Also, your learning, your growth, we require teachers and staff to do professional development. You want them to grow just as much as anybody else does, including yourselves. So, and align them with the CSIP, make sure that. But we can help you with that if that's something that you're interested in, certainly.
Yeah, it
It
sounds
shouldn't be
definitely
a mind-boggling burden to do superintendent. It's important, and it needs data, but it can be so crippling.
Well,
if
if
you're
it's
not-
not giving feedback that's authentic and meaningful to me, then it's really not.
If it's not,
it's not helping
if it's
me
not
either.
helping you progress,
Right.
it's not a thing.
Right, I don't need a checkbox or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you need to know what's being measured, what are you gonna use, to evaluate the performance. Like I said, it's not a one and done. This is a year-long process. And you don't wait till January and go, gotcha, you didn't get it done, did you?
Yeah.
That's not, these are all year long. What's being accomplished, how we doing, how's it coming, Marty, on your goals? And keeps you guys focused on data and information. Okay, so you want them to be objective, you don't want them to be subjective. You know, it's, like I said, you don't want opinions, you want facts and data to support it. So, this is what you want. You want evidence. You can hold your hat on, because come January 19th, whatever date it is, the media's gonna ask, you know, extend the contract, how was the performance evaluation? What was it? They're entitled to see that. It's public knowledge. So, a little about some of that effective decision-making as a board. And I dealt with this with the board this morning. Just exact what I'm talking about. Dealing with beliefs and feelings, personal experience, dealing with that. The board member had heard that all we're feeding kids is garbage in the lunch menu. It's just garbage. Sugar, all this kind of stuff. And so, board member heard that and just went on a tirade. We gotta get rid of our food service people, fire them, get rid of the contract, done, out of here. It was all just opinions that he heard. And I said, well, what kind of data do you have to support that? You know, does it meet the FDA requirements? Nutritional requirements? Yeah. Well, then how, you can disagree with the requirements. That's a different issue. Us complying with the requirements is what we're here to do, to make sure we comply with them. So I said, you gotta have more than just what you're hearing and your opinion and thought and feelings about it. Give me some data that shows that they're not getting a good meal, or kids are picking the wrong foods to eat. I don't know what's on the lunch menu, I didn't go that deep, but it was all based on opinion and feelings as opposed to give me some hard facts before I start canceling a contract with a food service vendor because you're feeding sugar. That's not necessarily factual, because it meets the requirements. So, I mean, it's one of those things, the more data, the more evidence, the more information you have, the better decisions you're gonna make. And not relying just on feelings and people's thoughts and opinions about it. Dig down. And that gets back down some of that community comments to you as a board member, complaining to you about things that they've heard. You're doing this. You know, you're teaching CRT in every class that you got. Well, they're hearing that from somewhere. You know, you need facts to back that up. Say, yes, we are. No, we're not. You know, it gets, because it gets so emotionally charged sometimes with issues that you can't see the forest for the trees. So your role is to get the facts and make those decisions. Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts, before we get into kind of the last segment of what we're gonna talk about? We're doing great on time. I don't believe you guys don't have any issues here that you want to talk about.
I want to talk about the restroom.
5-minute break.
Cool.
10-minute break, whatever it takes.
We are still streaming.
So
So, you know, during your break.
I said, well, that's what you guys are doing in Springfield, isn't it? Haven't they done some of the training has involved some of that? Have I seen some of that online? Is that misinformation?
Yes and no. The first thing they did some equity training.
Go back to work?
And 95% of it was really good. Really good. But, and we had a couple slides,
There are cookies in
a couple things they put in there that wasn't specifically, specifically did it was close as from people who supported that. And so they took it out immediately, because I raised Kate up and said, I'm not doing this, I'm not teaching this, I'm teaching our staff all that. So they take it out and changed
Those
it.
cookies.
Pretty good.
It's like social media, once it got out there, it would go away. Even though they took it out of the whole training and got rid of it. Wow, their teachers CRT, they put this chart in there 3 years ago. It's gone, we quit doing that, I haven't done that. But, it was just, they did go a little too far.
Well,
And I was offended. And I just said, this is BS. You know, I'm not gonna feel guilty about nothing. For whatever it is.
you know, when you hear that word, that automatically is kind of a red flag when you hear the word equity. You know?
Oh, totally. Oh, and people go straight to CRT instead of what is equity, because equity has nothing to do with race necessarily. It's a whole band of things, and so, but it's got the bad rap. And, so, but they're riding that horse to the end. Politicians are big time. I don't know if you've had any much public comment or anything, not just about that, but anything. You guys have been fairly calm in the meetings.
No, you were talking about Glenn a while ago. We've known for a long time what we have. And my daughter was a teacher here. She student taught at Willard and it was around Springfield, and when she came back here, she said that she just felt like that our school was top of the line, safe. Glenn's on top of all. And actually, I read some in the grocery store the other day. It was several weeks after the Texas shooting. And we talked about that. I mean, that was just a total breakdown. I mean, I just can't imagine with Glenn being here, anything like that happen. I mean, I'm not saying the guy can't come in,
Not saying it couldn't happen, but it's.
but the response would have
Yeah.
been completely different.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate, because most of the ones that have occurred, they messed them up.
You just hit me. And then you're on the straight right now.
I was reluctant.
Yeah. But, anyway,
Oh, okay. See, I pushed really hard in Springfield, I had this all over every one of these buildings in high schools. That's resources, I know it's,
no, I'm not talking about SR.
no, you said this, yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And so we were.
That's the other, I'm not always comfortable with this. I am with Glenn here. I am with Glenn here. Other places, I'm not as.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Because he,
You bet. Actually, I'm like, let's get everybody back, let's get it rolling.
Yes.
Get some stress over it.
In here, I feel comfortable with it if they
The
just
building
went off
principal,
on their
that
own.
first part of
yes,
August,
it may start, he was just.
build up, get here to go. It's even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not done. I'm over there.
Both everybody.
Just me right now. Probably in a few weeks. Maybe before school starts, maybe we'll get over there.
James in the middle of Colorado, papers.
Oh,
I don't blame her. That's a big job.
So, I think it's gonna be.
Oh, yeah, I am too. Yeah, but we got the new administrators, and I'm gonna take them all on a retreat to Echo Bluff for work on planning and getting everything lined out. So I'm excited for that.
You wanna keep him as long as you can.
It's pretty quiet. Oh, yeah.
Sweat pits used to be years ago. Or what, sweat pits? What, 10 years ago, in there,
I had something to do with government, I got out going through it.
And stuff, and then they've cleaned it up.
little swag, probably only 1,000 people come in once a month, the rest are 3, big group.
That's what you wanna do.
There'd be 1,000 people down, 1,000, different too, big group.
Like I said, some of the new, most of the full parcels that goes everything. He has some.
Well, great. Well, Great had that little stint.
Yeah.
And before that, the one before that, it was.
Baby blonde.
Who was the governor before Greiten?
Nixon.
Yeah.
Nixon.
I think he had something to do with
He
the
did.
development of that
Yeah,
whole thing.
cleaning it up, and, yeah, making
Well,
Echo Bluff is
Echo
what they're.
Bluff.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't Nixon have something to do with that?
Yeah.
That's good.
You've been down
He
quite a
was,
bit.
he was in office, and when they got a ton of money from the settlement,
With the breach of the Tom Salk or what?
no, it was, just a lead mine settlement that no one had done things wrong.
Something.
And anyway, so they got all this money, and so Nixon kind of allowed others to push through these various state parks. The one, at that point, still hung up down there, just, but the big argument was that money was supposed to be used to either reclaim some of the land that was messed up by the lead mines, or to protect equitable types of land. And that's the clause they used in buying these state parks.
Right.
And
Well, there was some was it controversy that it wasn't all that much land and it was a whole lot of building or something? Or there
Which
was
one?
The Echo Bluff. There was some sort of controversy.
There's only one building now.
they spent, there's a bunch of them. They got the lodge, and then they got
Right.
about 10 cabins.
Well, before they built that,
Okay, yeah.
it was just
I just
one.
remember there being kind
But
of,
they-
people was a little up in arms over how that thing went down.
They overbuilt
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, like the HVAC systems are more than what they needed for. If you look at those cabins, the concrete foundations, they're built up pretty high, but it's overdone, you know.
It's a good place to go eat. They have some, murder mystery dinners down in there.
I got a restaurant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
You have to look it up, they have it sometimes.
Well,
A lot of singing down there along the bluff. I mean, it's really neat.
It's
It's
pretty
got a
good.
great campground.
And-
You like I say, you can rent cabins.
Yeah.
there's a big long gravel road along the creek.
Was
just
it
back-
Sinking Creek or what?
Sinking Creek, yeah. And great place for kids, because the water's shallow, it's a big long gravel water, they can run and play, and it's never crowded, you know.
See, when that first opened up, 100 years ago, that was a camp. Yeah, yeah. It's worth it going down
Yeah,
there.
they would try to drive down there.
Well, when you go down there, you get Round Springs and all that, you know.
All right, we're on the downswing now. But one of the things Mac and I and Marty talked a little bit about as we were putting some of the topics together was, plus as I said before, you've got a new rule coming down that you've got to have a community engagement plan by next July. That's coming down, that you'll have to put together based on a lot of public input and that kind of thing. So, I don't know, we're talking now about how we as MSB are gonna help districts do that. Don't know how we're gonna do that yet, but districts are gonna need some help and support of just what that entails. But I want to talk about 3 things with respect to just the whole community engagement. And I'm gonna unpack each one of those a little bit in detail with the perspective of that in front of us, and the possibility down the road, if you guys ever decide to do a ballot issue of anything. And I don't know if you are or not, that's a decision, you guys, strategic decision you make, but I noticed on your superintendent search thing, talked about future building needs. That was one of the, I think that was what it was called, something about building facilities or something, wasn't it? Yeah. So that tells me that you're thinking down the road. And this is not just a one-time, you just wake up tomorrow and go, hey, let's do this, and then next Tuesday you put it on the ballot, or something like that. So this takes strategic thinking and doing that. So I want to focus on how we engaging the community itself, how you build that support, and how you find those needs that you gotta have. And I sense you guys got a lot of support in the community. Very supportive community of your school district. Now, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I just got a feeling that I didn't say it was 100%, never gonna be, but overall, you're a vital part of the community. In some cases, you are the community. And that's what happens Friday nights, that's what happens Tuesdays and Fridays. That's the social, that's where people go. And that's great, that's a good thing. So I'm big on that. So, how do we engage the community? One is, it's really important that you know your community. And you all are part of it. You know, you got peeps, you know, your friends and acquaintances, you've got people you know, but you really got to know all 2,000 population of Willow Springs. What makes them up? You can do that by surveys, focus groups, lots of ways you can do it. I'm not gonna tell you how to do it necessarily, but it's important that you know your community. Because you anticipate stuff. Easy to get them engaged, not easy. They don't really want to be engaged, don't know. It's back to how much do you want to know? The community may not want, don't tell me anything until you got a problem. And sometimes you will. Get the community involved. However you want to do it. I know you involve them in different committees that you guys got, you put together, whatever, curriculum committees, or looking at resources, you involve parents, community members, things like that. That is awesome. You want to do that, involve them. Take them in your buildings. Let them tour your facilities. Whether it's chamber, whether it's leaders in your community, develop a team within your community to help you. I don't know if you've got advisory groups that help you as a board, like teacher advisories, parents, businesses, just to give you feedback. Don't know. I mean, that's something you guys think about it. If you want to run some of these weird ideas across somebody, sometimes that's a good group. Seniors. We had a senior advisory group. How do we keep them informed? We tried to have like a curmudgeon advisory group of all the people that didn't like us, and kept them informed. Because, we get circled around our people that's our friends and supportive, but we don't talk to those other people. You gotta bring them in the fold. Have to bring them in. And to be part of it. But the one thing, always be laser focused on what your priorities are. Community needs to know what your priorities are. Your CSIP, what things you want to accomplish, community needs to understand this, so they know what it is. How do you build support? You said a while ago, you gotta build trust. Trust with your staff, trust with your parents, trust with your business community, whomever. Build that trust. That was one of the things you had on your list for the superintendent, build trust. So, You know, that's something that you've got to have that before you do anything. You've got to have some trust. Be transparent. So before, whatever it is, put it on the table, even to the community. It's important that they know and understand. I know one of the things in our last bond issue, we were wanting to rebuild one of the buildings. It was old. It was to the point where classrooms couldn't go to the restrooms except on a schedule, because they couldn't flush at the same time. It would just create a habit. Well, we took the people through the building and let them tour that and see firsthand what happens when you do that. And it's like, we got kids living in this kind of condition of going to school. It was an easier sell, I can tell you. And that sell's not the right word, but it was easy for them to see the real issue at hand of what's going on. So be transparent. Utilize comparisons. You've got a conference, you've got schools similar to you across the state. Compare yourself. Where are you? I know where your levy is. You know, where's that within your conference? I know what your debt service might be. What's that compared? What, even academic scores. I mean, just, it's good to know how you compare with the state, with other districts of your size in your conference that people know. Utilize them. Utilize that. That's data. That's data, good data that you can use and do that. You gotta speak in one voice as a board. Be unified. Years ago, we tried our first bond issue before I was on the board. The year before I was on the board, they tried to pass a bond issue. Well, they did it. We had a board member that came out and fought against it. Did it pass? Not even close. Just that, you've got to be all on the same page. And just make sure everybody, whatever you do, if you take something or not, be on the same page. Develop a communication and marketing plan. How are you going to go out, if you want to do something, how do you get that across and make people aware of the needs? And I can tell you, it needs to be, or the best way is owner-generated, community-generated. They need to be behind it, supportive of it, pushing for it. You can't, we learned this lesson the hard way. You can't put a plan together and then try to sell a community on the plan. They see right through that. Bring them in. Get them involved. Get them supportive, and they're the ones who does the grunt work, the leg work to help sell it. Doesn't have to be you guys. It's the community. Because you will have opposition. Period. That's fine. You just need to know there's going to be misinformation, disinformation out there. Stick with the facts. That's all you can do. Stick with the facts. I mean, you're going to have opposition regardless of what you do. You know, you want to change a bus route, you're going to have opposition. You want to change your schedule, your bell schedule, you're going to have opposition. I mean, that's just learning how to deal with that is really important, so that it's all factual information, because it impacts somebody. I told, when I worked at city utilities for 30 years, and I basically was in charge of operations. I could build a new power plant, took it to the board, no community discussion whatsoever, $500 million. I changed the bus route 2 blocks, had 24 people come to the board meeting saying how awful it was. Because it was real to them. I mean, they couldn't comprehend that was real. And so they understood that. And so, you know, people need to understand exactly what your vision is, what your purpose is, and what the need is, and help them understand that. And we always use the phrase, tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did. Because the accountability at the end, I was going to build this school under budget or do whatever, came in under budget, we did that, there it is. We did what you asked us to do. identify the needs up front, whatever those needs are. If it's teacher salaries, facilities, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. Define them very specifically and definitively, so that everybody understands what they are. You don't want to put out there, I want a new athletic facility. You need a new football field, or you want turf on the football field. Whatever
Don't
it
bring
is.
that up.
I'm sorry. Or, well, I'm being specific. What is it that you're asking your community to
Right.
get behind, and why? It can't be vague. It's gotta be very definitive, very clear cut, whatever it is. And put that master plan together. How does this fit in the whole scheme of Willow Springs Bears, or whatever it is? Academically, whatever. How does it fit? And have all this objective data you need to support any of that. So let's talk about community engagement a little bit, and your thoughts about that. Knowing that that's coming down the road with 681, but, you know, I know there's no plans to do anything, it's just important to get the community engaged, one way or the other. And I don't know how involved they are now, how much they want to be involved or engaged. So, I don't have an answer to that question, only you guys know that question. Would you consider them engaged?
But I think it's hard to put a number on it. I mean, I think on certain subjects, they're really engaged, and other stuff, I mean, kinda, just like anybody else, it kinda just goes by us and stuff. But I mean, overall, I think we've got a community that has interest in what's happening here and different subject matter. We see people show up and represent.
They're involved?
I think I don't know if this fits completely, but, you know, there's a lot of, I guess, critiquing or criticism or of boards, other places that are doing some pretty outlandish things. And I think it's easy for the community to kind of impute that onto school boards in general, you know? So I think it's good for us to have a good, clear, what we stand for, what we represent back to that community. So we don't get that imputed onto us on, you know, what kind of some of the stuff we see happen across the country.
Just because they can,
Right,
as opposed to what are the needs?
right.
What really needs to happen here to make, you know, I told, I guess the first superintendent I dealt with, and we were going through all the construction things. We had roofs were leaking, we had buckets next to the students with rain, you know, when it rained, there was leaks in the stuff, and, you know, I said, you know, best thing can happen for us is come the middle of June, one of the buildings collapses. You know, no kids in it, no school, nothing. People will see a need. And that kind of got us thinking about, you gotta get people into the process. They gotta see that kind of stuff.
And I don't know,
Because our scores were good. Well, we don't need to spend that kind of money if the scores are still good. Well, kids aren't in a good learning environment with a bucket there collecting water. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
well, no, but, and not to heap more things on Marty, but like, I don't know if you're not, either have a spouse or a relative or a kid in school, it's easy to get disconnected from what's going on at school. Other than a basketball team or a football team or something like that, and I don't know how, I don't know how we as a board bridge that gap between, like, you know, like my dad, he's 73, he's not, doesn't have any kids at school anymore. You know, and it's easy to get disconnected from, not so much the day-to-day thing, but just actually what's going on at school other than athletic teams.
Right, yeah, absolutely. It's, then it becomes has to be very intentional, so that you include your dad.
And if they have some kind of information that's, you know, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, then there's less of that, you know, we're gonna heap our school board in with all the other school boards in the nation that are doing these outlandish things.
Right, right. And that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, no one knows your community better than you guys do. And so it's just a matter of what can you do, how do you get them involved? How do you address the senior citizens? that don't have kids in school, or anybody that doesn't have kids in school, because they don't tend to be connected. You know, somehow you gotta connect them somehow, because I
And
was.
some of them don't wanna be.
I understand.
But
Oh,
some,
totally.
some do.
Totally. And you know, anything you ever take to the ballot, even any political election, whatever, you're gonna have 15 or 20% of the people that are gonna vote no if you gave them $1,000. And you're gonna have 15 or 20% that's gonna vote yes, even if you take 1,000. I mean, they're supportive of the school, they're gonna vote yes. So you're dealing with about 65, 70% of the people in the middle that are, I've gotta work with them, so they understand the needs. Because you're not gonna get that 20%. I mean, that's election theory, you know, there's some you're just not gonna get.
Well, one of
Doesn't
your,
mean you don't try, I'm just saying you don't.
one of your points there on engaging the community is know the community, and I'm not sure we know the community as well as we think we do. It's changing quite a bit, you know, we have a lot of transition as far as in the school even, of kids coming and going. And then we've got a lot of people, you know, more in the last few years that have moved in that, you know, I don't know how much we know about them, and I don't know how much they know about the school. So I think that goes both ways as far as getting information out to them and getting to know them.
And one of the things you talked a while ago, where was it? The face of the brand, which is Marty, but don't discount your guys' involvement either. Because you are part of that face too, to some degree. Maybe not quite as much, but that's the beauty of not only knowing the community, but them knowing you. Them knowing you guys. That's as important, them knowing who you are and what you stand for and what the board stands for. And that's getting out. Getting out to meetings, getting out to people, getting out, you know, making yourself visible. And it's a lot of time in the day for you to do that, I understand, but, yeah, but it is part of being the face of the brand, is when they think of that, they see Martin's picture on the billboard instead of his. So,
Talking about you, Jeff.
Yeah, your face already.
so what else about community engagement that comes to, or stirs any kind of, it's a tough one. I mean, it sounds really easy on paper, but it's hard. Some people don't want to be engaged, it's pushing a rope uphill sometimes.
But like you said, I think the more facts people have, you know, about this is what's happening at school, maybe it's in the Howell County News or once a quarter, something like that, and that gives them something more to talk about than something that's, you know, coffee shop stuff.
It takes some time,
It
but I
does.
think, you know, like we've talked about a lot tonight, trust, transparency,
Mhm.
all of those things over time. And then you have to be intentional about,
Mhm.
you do have to get out and,
Yeah.
promote the brand and, you know, get out, the facts that are going on. It's, you know, I get hit up a lot of, you know, kind of what like Matt was talking about, some people that, you know, have these ideas about what happens at school that are nowhere close to what's going on. So we need to be diligent about pushing out what is happening, and I think that, you know, making sure we have open doors as much as we can, and we,
I think you had a great response, and I hope you don't mind me sharing. You know, Marty's got 2 kids in the district.
3.
3, yes, sorry.
All right.
You know, I've got, you know, we all got a tie to this thing, right? Do you think we want that, you know, any of this outlandish
Right.
stuff? Do you
Right.
think we'd actually want that to take place with our, you know, our own children, or our own family members that are involved in it? I think that's a great response
Yeah.
to those types of questions, is like, you know.
Well, and it goes to show too that, you know, I don't have kids directly, but I have nieces and
You have
nephews,
family.
and I have family, and I'm a graduate of here, and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
my home. And so I think that nobody has a per se agenda of their own. It's just what's best for the kids in the community And then for us is our, I think a big part of what we do and need to do is to cast the vision going forward of what do we, how are we gonna move it in the direction and getting people to say, hey, I can get on board with that.
Exactly. You're driving the wagon down the street, you just want people hopping on it. That's what you want. As many people as you get on that wagon, is what you're trying to accomplish. And, if you've got good news things going on in the district, blast those out.
Now, if we're
Share
not,
those.
if we're not careful, and if we, like you said, we gotta be intentional about that, because otherwise, people, the only information they have about school is what, the football score, or the softball score, or whatever, what they see on Facebook, what they hear on the news, or whatever, and some of that they hear from somewhere else is translated to what's happening here too, So intentionally putting out the good things and senior project night. I just, that's a good night, and I see a lot of people there that I don't see anywhere else. And that's an opportunity, that's one opportunity that some of those people come in and see what's going on in our school. And there are a lot of others, like music programs and so on, where parents and grandparents come. All those things are important though, but those are just little pieces of the whole puzzle.
Well,
Yeah, we need to be telling collectively the story of Willow Springs schools, and if we're not, then they're writing their own story.
and you've got 7 ambassadors right here.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the roles up here. I mean, you are ambassadors for the district. They see you, it's what you talked about, you got kids in school, you're a graduate, you wanna see great things happen here. I mean, you sell this, they understand, they believe you, you have credibility. Because you've either been here, you graduated here, you taught here, you got kids here, you're vested. You have a vested interest in this thing. You can't get any better than that. Can't get any better than that. Okay, winding up here. Next to the last slide. This is just kind of summarizing what we've talked about, more about that developing them. Honor each other's roles as board and superintendent. I said stay in the lanes, absolutely. You guys got jobs to do, he's got jobs to do. Make sure you honor each one of those. Stay focused on your mission and goals. Keep that out there as that beacon that you're chasing. Always keep that out there at the forefront. Your community needs to know that. Not just you guys and your staff and students and everybody, communities though. Follow your policies. Can't say that anymore. Importantly, I said, well, I go, they're your friend. They are. That's your guidance. So follow your policies. Support your decisions as a board. Talked about that. Monitor data. Regularly use the data. Communicate openly and frequently. I mean, that communication's a big part of it. Among yourselves, among the community, among your staff. Communicate. Be transparent and be open. Okay. About 5 minutes or? Okay, let's just talk a little bit, just gonna close out here. 2 things. What 2 things did you get?
Stay in your lane.
Huh?
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. What else stood out to you? Anything else?
That's the only one you told us that we had to remember. That one.
I've accomplished my task.
Chain of command. That was
Chain of
the only one
command.
he put out there a lot.
Stay in your lane, chain of command. What else? Matt? What sticks in your mind?
I think through part of the process, I was able to evaluate, some of the things I've done over the last 2 years and what's been appropriate and what's been inappropriate and where I can improve and, what I want to do different with Marty than, I did with the last administrator, But I think, I identified some stuff like, I probably shouldn't have, maybe that was a little out of line or maybe that, so.
Like I said before, this is a new team. It's a new
Some
team.
reflection there for me.
I think it's nice to just put things in writing up in front of everybody where you can see it, and we just kind of, I don't know that we always have a lot of or at least my very short stint, that we kind of, you know, spitball some ideas and talk about things ourselves that we want to do and what we want to be. And so it's nice to
Yep.
have that in front of us.
Well, I think, just to tie on to that, you know, let's talk about staying focused on the mission and goals. Have we really outlined, like, we need to take some time and do that at some point in time and outline what that is for this board, so we know how to stay focused on it.
It's really easy when you're not focused to run off on tangents. What else? Anybody else?
That's great to see some of the examples of what to do, what not to do, how to handle different situations throughout this, because we all know, especially in a small town, it's gonna happen.
Yep. I mean, those aren't unrealistic
Correct.
possibilities.
Correct.
They've happened.
Yeah.
They've happened.
So it's good to know how to handle that and how, you know, our leader wants us to handle that effectively, so.
And, you know, also the fact that each board member brings a certain skill set, and finding the best way to utilize that without getting out of their lane is really important, because we do have some valuable knowledge here.
A diverse board is a good thing. When operating efficiently, effectively, and in your role. A diverse board is good. You make better decisions, and things are, you look at things differently and from different viewpoints. That's a good thing. What would you like to know more about? What would you know, what are you gonna be talking about next? That may be somewhat rhetorical, but not totally. I mean, where do you see yourself going now?
I think we definitely need to have a mission goals session where we can talk about that as well as our mission statement, just kind of revisit that a little bit. I'd like to investigate the superintendent evaluation a little bit more, give you guys some examples of some options you might have for that. Yeah, those are all good things moving forward that I think we need to look at.
Sure.
Yep.
I think we, you kind of answered that one. I think.
Yep.
So, that's it, folks.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank
That
you.
was
Yeah.
very beneficial.
Well, I hope so. I hope you got something out of it, and you take on. I think you got a good foundation. Sounds like you got a great board.
Well, I appreciate you guys somewhat willingly doing this.
Wednesday night for 3
I mean, I
hours.
know that, you know, it
Dislocated shoulders.
took, it took, a few hours out of an evening that you could have been doing something else.
Yeah.
But I felt like this was important as we do kind of rebuild a lot of different parts of the whole system. And so I appreciate y'all being willing to do this.
And I think the fact that you've been on the board helps the credibility of what you had to say.
I appreciate
The
that.
time that you've had, I think that makes it easier to.
I've had some interesting experiences. And it's different from a Springfield board to a Willow Springs board.
Sure.
The governance is the same, issues are different, but the governance is the same as a board. But, yeah, and that's why I love doing talking boards about being better boards and how can we do that? Because, I mean, we're all in it for the same reason,
Right.
for the good reason of helping our kids.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Jared.
Well, thank you for your spending 2.5 hours. I told Lonnie I'd do
That's not
2.5
bad.
hours.
Hey, that's great.
Let's go 5 minutes early.
We're not gonna go
We get
anywhere.
to, yeah.
Oh, you're staying?
We get to stay.
Staying for a little bit.
Oh.
We have that other end
Oh.
of the agenda there. that's-
Oh, and that other end is not adjournment.
That's right.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, well, I'm going. Is it closed session?
It is, it will be.
That's to make sure that I get kicked out, so.
But it's, good time for a break.
That's two extra.
Okay.
Is Alvin say, time to take a break.
Do you need to make the motion to,
Uh,
to go to executive session or?
yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I'd receive a motion to,
It's gonna be a roll call, and coach is up.
yeah, we'll wait for him. He could just not vote on it.
I guess we could not vote.
Still pass it, yeah.
Well, it's been down here for a while.
It lasted good, yeah.
Probably came with that TV up there.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
You need a TV?
No,
We won't buy it.
I know.
That's something you're just letting you know. Okay. Y'all
Have a good drive back.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good rest of your meeting
Oh, yeah.
and summer.
Thank you, yeah, appreciate your help here.
Coach, good to see you.
And safe drive.
Well, it's not too bad. 90 miles isn't too
No, no, it's quick.
bad. I'm going to Columbia, yeah.
Yeah.
Easy drive.
All right, Jerry.
See you guys later.
Thanks.
Okay, now I'd receive a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll do that by roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Alright.
Bye.
Okay, so now that we're back in open session, I would receive a motion to amend the previously adopted motion to not accept the resignation of Jewel Holloway by removing the word "not."
So moved.
Second.
Matt and Brent. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. I would now receive a motion to amend the previously adopted motion to not accept the resignation of Tracy Cottingham by removing the word "not."
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Motions have passed. I'd now take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We adjourn.